Namaskar, good evening. You're watching the Newshour at 9 and I'm Swati Joshi. The visuals from Gaza hospital depict the horrors of the brutal war that has been raging between Israel and Hamas for 11 days now. Just hours before US President Joe Biden was to arrive in Israel, a deadly blast ripped through the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza and more than 500 people are feared dead. Not only patients at the hospital but also hundreds of Palestinians who had taken refuge in the compound over the last 2-3 days were hit. Videos of the aftermath from Al-Ahli hospital show flames engulfing the building, hospital grounds littered with bodies. But the question is, who's responsible for this massacre? Israel and Hamas are blaming each other for the deadliest strike on civilians in Gaza since the start of this bloody war. Israel has even released audio-video proofs of the bombing, claiming that a failed rocket launched by the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the death of hundreds of innocents. Let's first show you the exact moment of bombing.
Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Ya Allah! مستشفى انجليزي مستشفى انجليزي يا رب يا رب.
Piece by piece, Israel has put together a sequence of events to claim that it was a rocket barrage fired by Hamas from a nearby cemetery that hit the parking lot outside the hospital. Maps showing trajectory of rocket, videos of impact and details of attack aftermath have also been released. The Israeli military also released a recording that is between two Hamas operatives discussing the blast. Here the speakers admit that it was believed to be an Islamic Jihad misfire and that the shrapnel appeared to be from the Islamic Jihad weapons, not Israel's.
بقول لك أول مرة بنشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه، فبقول لك تبع الجهاد الصواريخ الجهاد الإسلامي هاي. فهم بقولوا تعاون الجهاد الإسلامي. شكله من عين بيحكوا إن الشظايا تبعت الصاروخ إنه شظايا محلية مش زي شظايا عاد هذول تلاقيهم من المقبرة الورا دي بفلت محط فيهم. ايش ده؟ بتلاقيهم طالعين من المقبرة الورا المستشفى المعمداني دي اللي هو فسه ونزل عندهم. المعمداني يقول لك عند الساحة بالضبط. أول ما تدخل على الساحة تدخلش على البلد بعيدك اليمين في مستشفى المعمداني.
While Israel cited intel to assert that Islamic Jihad killed hundreds in Gaza, Palestine has vehemently denied Israel's claims, calling Netanyahu a liar. Listen in.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Al-Hali al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza. I repeat, this is the responsibility of Islamic Jihad that killed innocents in the hospital in Gaza.
We have concrete evidence that Israel did not attack the Al-Ahli hospital. Furthermore, we are 100% sure that this hospital was hit by a failed rocket launch by the Islamic Jihad. Palestinian terror organizations are murdering civilians from both sides. This evidence will be presented in the UN Security Council meeting today for the whole international community to see.
He is a liar. His spokesperson and digital spokesperson tweeted that Israel did the hit, thinking that there is around this hospital a base for Hamas, and then he deleted that tweet. We have a copy of that tweet. Now they change the story to try to blame the Palestinians. The Israeli spokesperson of the army about a week ago, made a statement in which he said, evacuate the hospitals. Their intentions is evacuate or hospitals will be hit, and they are responsible for that crime, and they cannot fabricate stories to deal with it.
Let's also show you this image, this latest image which has been tweeted by Israel, and it claims that at least 30 to 40% of the rockets fired by Hamas from Gaza failed to land in Israel and instead end up hurting its own civilians. The red dots that you see signify the failed attempts of rocket launches. And according to the Israeli forces, this has not happened for the first time. It has happened many a times in the past, almost 30 to 40 times when these rocket launches fail and the rockets end up hurting civilians in Palestine, living in the Gaza area. Now, Israel-Palestine blame game has begun. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden today backed Netanyahu, saying that based on what he had seen, the attack was carried out by the other team and not Israel. Listen in.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
On October 7th, Hamas murdered 1,400 Israelis, maybe more. This is in a country of fewer than 10 million people. This would be equivalent to over 50,000 Americans murdered in a single day. That's 29 11s. That is why October 7th is another day that will live in infamy.
So US President has said we stand with Israel today, tomorrow and always, and the blame game continues as well. Now, big question, the legitimate question tonight is who is responsible for Gaza massacre? Let's take this across to our guests.
You're watching the News Hour at 9, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let me introduce you to the guests. We're joined by Rear Admiral Dr. Eyal Pinko, ex-senior intelligence officer, cyber and national security expert. We have Yoni Leviathan, writer, on the broadcast with us. Charles Kupchan, senior fellow CFR. Sushant Sareen, senior fellow ORF. Dr. Walter Ladwig III, senior lecturer, international relations, King's College, London. Hiba Husseini, former legal advisor to the Palestinian peace negotiating team. Thank you very much for joining us. Hiba Husseini, I want to come to you first. Israel has put the onus on the Islamic Jihad, saying this was a failed rocket launch that hit the hospital. And while the blame game continues, today Joe Biden said that the other team is responsible for the attack and not Israel. How are you looking at that development?
We're looking at this development with great concern. 500 Palestinians killed at the hospital and over 3,000 killed over the last 12 days. So this is a part and parcel of the violence and the airstrike and the strikes coming from the sea against civilians in the Gaza Strip.
Israel claims that it has nothing to do with this. It was a failed rocket launch by Islamic Jihad that has hit the hospital. So Hamas is responsible, not Israel.
This is the story that Israel has spun. Israel has to provide evidence. The Palestinians have denied this, of course. And we believe that the Israelis, this is part of the Israeli actions. I mean, the airstrikes are part of the Israeli actions over the last 12 days that have not stopped.
Do you believe the satellite images, the video proof, the audio conversation that Israel claims is between two Hamas operatives who are talking about the failed rocket launch? Do you believe the evidence that Israel is presenting today to the world, saying, look, Israel has nothing to do with what has happened at the hospital?
This is Israeli evidence. This is what Israel has presented. I have not seen it. I cannot debate it. It is what I hear is that it is not accurate in terms of what has happened last night.
Dr. Pinko, how do you respond to that? Of course, Joe Biden has backed Israel. He made it clear that U.S. supports Israel today, tomorrow and always. But he also said that, let's not forget that Hamas does not represent Palestinians. Let's also not forget that our responsibility is also towards civilians in Palestine. But yes, the big statement that came in from Joe Biden was that he believes the other team is responsible and not Israel.
Unfortunately, there are many people that lost their lives over there. But as we see Al Jazeera movie, this is not an Israeli movie, this is Al Jazeera video showing exactly that how the rockets are being launched from a place near the hospital and getting hit, the hospital after that getting hit. Everything that Israel did until now was to avoid schools, kindergartens, and hospitals, even though Israel knows that all the Hamas infrastructure is below ground and below hospitals, and everything is over there. For example, you can see that in Shifa hospitals, the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip, 5 floors below the ground level, all Hamas infrastructure is over there. Rockets, missiles, the headquarters, they are sitting below the hospitals because they know that Israel will not bombarding this hospital. More than that, Israel has announced already that to evacuate from the places that the Air Force is going to launch an attacks. But we can see evidence, videos that were taken in the Gaza Strip, not by Israelis, by Hamas and by the residents over there, that Hamas is taking all the car keys of the people over there and not allowing him to go from the north to the south part, even though Israel announced that it's going to attack. And we see that for many years. Hamas is using the human shields of women and children in order to attack. We saw that for many years on the fence when they are sending the women and the kids to be near the fence, and those hero terrorists are behind them and trying to fire and shooting towards the Israeli. So there are records that are coming from the Gaza Strip. There are videos, Al Jazeera video showing that the rockets was fired from there. And unfortunately, this is what happened in the Gaza Strip. As you know, the Gaza Strip is being controlled by Hamas. This is not Israeli territory. This is not occupation. This is totally Hamas or Hamas land. It's being ruled over the Hamas. Hamas was nominated by elections over there. They took control over the Palestinian Authority. So Gaza is being owned, is being controlled, is being governed by Hamas, which does everything that he wants over there, including killing innocent people as a human shield, and they're using the civilian infrastructure.
While you cite evidence and while Israel is releasing these images and videos and talking about evidence that have been released by non-Israeli entities, Palestinians believe and are alleging that it is all due to the airstrikes being conducted by Israel. And do you also think that the narrative, the global view is now shifting? Of course, superpowers are standing with Israel, but many today are also pointing out how thousands are losing their life in Palestine.
Yes, but I think that the world already forgot what happened last week, that 2,500 Palestinian terrorists from the Gaza Strip, from Hamas, burst into Israel, raped hundreds of women, raped hundreds of kids, slaughtered kids. There are pictures over there taken by the Hamas. It's not pictures that taken by Israelis. It was taken by Hamas, showing how brutal they are, killing innocent people, kids, women, slaughtered men, slaughtered. It's crazy, crazy videos. So the world forgot in 1 week what happened over there. And this is what I can say.
So you're saying let's not forget who started it. Had Hamas not done this, there would not have been a war. I want to bring in Dr. Ladwig as well. Dr. Ladwig, US has taken a very clear stand. US is saying, Joe Biden is saying, based on what he has seen, the other team is responsible for it. How is UK looking at it? We do know that Rishi Sunak has said that the intelligence is looking at facts at this point of time to establish who actually is responsible and what the facts are.
Exactly. So the British government has taken a strong stand backing Israel after the initial attack. And the Prime Minister has indicated that British intelligence is contributing to the efforts to figure out exactly what happened with the hospital. But thus far, they have not taken sort of a rush to judgment position just yet. They're waiting to see how things play out.
I want to bring in Sushant Sareen as well. Sushant Sareen, I don't want to take away, the seriousness of the entire issue that we are talking about and sound insensitive, but there is also a propaganda war at play, isn't it?
Oh, entirely. I think the propaganda war, in fact, what happened last night is part and parcel of the propaganda war. So, for example, within minutes of the news coming out that there's been a bombing of the hospital, people had come out with casualty figures that 500 had died, and within the next half an hour, it was 800 people died. When morning came, there was light on the incident, and we saw that the hospital had actually not been hit. What was hit was a parking lot. And when you look at the images, and I must confess, I'm not a ballistics expert, I'm not an explosive expert, but from whatever little I know, this did not seem like one of those huge Israeli bombs which the Israelis are dropping on some of their sites. There was no crater. This was one of the typical kind of attacks which happen with the rockets which Hamas and the Islamic Jihad are firing, because there were just about 3 or 4 cars which were completely destroyed. There were a few other cars which were damaged. And there were casualties, of course, because there were apparently people in that parking lot, and there would have been casualties, and nobody is saying that, that's something that you can excuse. But when supposing about 15, and again, I think it sounds very macabre when you say only 15 or 20 died or 30 died and not 500, then you're counting dead bodies, and that's really strange. But then these are propaganda wars. So the moment something like this happens, you overinflate and over-exaggerate what has happened. But the hospital was still standing. So who actually died? How many people actually died out there? And the passions are so inflamed in any case that all you need is a small spark and the Arab street goes up in flames, whether it's in the West Bank, whether it's in Jordan, whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in Europe. And in fact, I think in many ways, Europe is becoming much worse than some of the Arab countries. The Arab countries at least will be able to enforce some discipline. I'm not so sure about European countries being able to keep their streets safe for people from some of the mobs. And yes, Twitter wars and Facebook wars and social media wars is part and parcel. Again, nothing new in this. In the old days, it used to be television and radio and stuff like that. These days, it's the social media is the tool of war. It's much faster. It's much more widespread. But it is the tool of war, just as like radio and television was in the past. People need to learn to live with it. People need to adjust to it. People need to, have some degree of restraint before you jump to conclusions and start pronouncing guilty verdicts. So supposing I was supporting Israel, I would say that the Islamic Jihad and the Hamas has done it. Somebody else who was on the Palestinian side would not even bat an eyelid before they would say Israel is the devil out here and they have dropped the bomb. And nobody would actually try and sort it out and say that let's step back, let's see what has happened. And the best thing to do is that what has happened in the morning, whatever pictures has come, if the Israelis have actually dropped the bomb, and there would be a lot of evidence of that, somebody should bring that evidence and actually nail the Israelis. But if there is no evidence, then whatever there is, the images suggest that this was a rocket which had gone wrong.
Hiba Husseini, I know you want to come in, but I quickly want to go across to Charles Kupchan. The four-way summit was cancelled. Do you see that as a setback for the diplomatic efforts that, US was trying to put in terms of bringing in peace or looking for stability in the entire Middle East region?
Well, it's clearly a setback in the sense that President Biden had hoped not only to visit Israel, talk to Mr. Netanyahu, but also hold a meeting with Arab leaders, including the Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas. And in the aftermath of this tragedy at the hospital, a decision was made that the optics would make that kind of meeting very difficult. It is the case that Secretary of State Blinken has been flying from one Arab state to another in order to advance diplomacy, make sure that the Abraham Accords are not falling apart. But we're headed into a very bumpy period here, and in many respects, the tragedy at the hospital brings it to a head. And none of us know exactly what happened. We have to let the facts speak for themselves. But we do know that innocent civilians are going to lose their lives in the coming battle. And I think that Israel, therefore, needs to pay attention to how it goes about its ground campaign. I fully support Israel going into Gaza. Any country that suffered the kind of heinous attack that Israel suffered would go in and try to decapitate the organization that carried out that attack. That having been said, and I think this is in keeping with Israel's practices over time, it should try to minimize civilian casualties.
Then let me ask you, does anybody really have the solution or a way out of this to ensure that innocent individuals in Palestine do not lose their lives and do not become a victim when Israel takes on Hamas after launching a ground offensive? Because Joe Biden also today said, let's ensure that help reaches, aid reaches Palestinians, civilians, and not Hamas. How is that going to be ensured? When you're talking about Hamas living in residential areas, using residential buildings as its launch pads?
Well, there is no way to ensure that no civilians will be killed. And that's simply because, as you just said, Hamas co-locates in homes, in schools, in hospitals, and mosques. As a consequence, they're the ones that are putting civilians at risk. But I do think that one of the reasons Israel has not yet gone in on the ground is it is buying time for Gazans to move from the north to the south. Diplomacy is proceeding to try to open the border crossing with Egypt so that some Gazans can get out and so that humanitarian aid can come in. These are crucial days where diplomacy is advancing. We'll have to wait and see how much success there is. But I do think that we do face a situation in which some civilians, probably a significant number of civilians, are going to lose their lives. And that does mean that we're looking at a perhaps wave of difficult days ahead in which anti-Israel sentiment is going to rise as we see these tragic images that are coming across our screens.
Right. So, pretty much everybody at this point of time is sounding helpless. One does believe that Israel has the right to defend itself, and Joe Biden said that Israel, it looks like, will continue to defend itself in this war against Hamas, but at the same time he's talking about the innocent lives being lost on the other side. I want to bring in Yoni in, because Yoni, I was going through your social media posts, and I believe you strongly object to the statement that Hamas does not represent Palestinians. And if that is your view, then why?
Because they won elections in 2006. There was elections held throughout the Palestinian territories in the West Bank and in Gaza, and they won. They didn't win outright. It was close, but they won. And so it is true that Hamas doesn't represent all of the Palestinian people. They represent a lot of them. They represent a majority of them. And we see it. We see it every time that there's an attack. This brutal attack, they're out in the streets, passing out candies. They support it. The one thing you have not seen in all of this fighting is every time a Palestinian dies, you don't see Israelis out in the street celebrating, because we don't enjoy killing Palestinians, but for some reason they enjoy killing us. So I have a hard time with this, that Palestinians or that Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinians. I firmly believe they don't represent all of them, because I have Palestinian friends. I have friends that are married to Palestinians. I live in Jaffa. It's a mixed city. I'm friends with Arabs, with Muslims. I know that they do not represent all of the Palestinians, but they represent way too many of them. And we see it. We see it in the protests and the marches all over the world. These people are supporting Hamas, which is a Nazi organization. They are Nazis. The acts that they committed are no different than what happened in the Holocaust. So yeah, I have a problem with this when people say they don't support it. They do. We have a problem. How do we deal with this? This isn't just some random terrorist group causing trouble in the region. These are the democratically elected leaders of a portion of the Palestinian people.
Hiba Husseini, how do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think we're engaging in a propaganda again. The point is that this war has come as a consequence of repression and aggression and of an occupation of the Palestinians for a long, long time. We have been suffering through the Nakba since 1948. We have been occupied in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, and we have seen no end in sight to this conflict. This conflict continues on with the settlement expansion, with the trespassing on the holy sites in Jerusalem, with provocation after provocation. And there is no end to this occupation. Oppression breeds violence. This is what's happening to the Palestinians. So the Palestinians are not celebrating. The Palestinians are humans like every other Israeli, and there are human values. There are universal values out there, and the life of a Palestinian is no less important than the life of an Israeli. And there's an outcry. I heard you speak. Let me speak. Don't interrupt me, please. I was very respectful throughout this whole conversation. So we are the oppressed. We are the occupied. End this occupation, settle this conflict, you will have security.
How will that happen? How will that happen? Because clearly an organization like Hamas does not want to do that. And till the time such organizations are not condemned, cornered, and in a way like Israel is saying finished off, is only going to intensify further.
Israel has a partner. The PLO is the partner. Mahmoud Abbas is the partner. They don't want to negotiate with him. They don't want to. Prime Minister Netanyahu has refused to negotiate with Abbas. They, on the contrary, what have they done? We have no partner. Continue the land grab. Continue the expansion. There are 750,000 settlers in the West Area C and surrounding East Jerusalem, 250,000 of them around Jerusalem. We are seeing continuous infringement on our rights, on our existence, on our daily lives. Gaza is a virtual prison. Over 2 million people for 17 years have had no opportunity of any normal living conditions. The West Bank, refugee camps, going into Jenin, going into Nablus, arrests in East Jerusalem. There are over 5,000 prisoners in Israeli jails, detained without trial. When does it stop? How does it stop? We have to sit down and negotiate.
But it clearly won't stop the Hamas way. It clearly won't stop the Hamas way.
Sorry?
It will clearly not stop the Hamas way, I am saying. After what Hamas has done, one cannot expect this to stop.
The Hamas is Hamas. I'm talking about the Palestinian Authority and the PLO as the partners for the Israeli government to sit down and negotiate with them. And this has been way over time. We cannot continue living like this. This war is not going to end. This war is not going to end the violence. There has to be a permanent resolution of this conflict.
Do both sides want a permanent resolution, and how will that happen, Dr. Eyal?
See, I listen to these ridiculous things that are being said here about the Palestinian Authority and all, and occupation. The Gaza Strip, for more than 15 years, belonged to the Palestinian Authority, and then was taken by Hamas. There is zero Israeli over there. There are Israeli inside Israel. There is Palestinian Authority, which is the owner and the sole governor of those territories. These are Palestinian Authority lands. Israel is not being there. The Palestinian way of thinking is let's do the salami. We call it the salami way. We took the lands in Judea and Samaria, which belongs to the Palestinians. Okay, now let's go to Jerusalem. After that, let's go to Jaffa. After that, let's go to Haifa. So this is the way they want. This is the way they want to do. Israel went into peace negotiations in Oslo for many, many years ago. And with the PLO and with the Palestinian authorities, a peace negotiation was signed and agreed, and also, of course, was implemented. After it was finished, the Palestinian Authority said, "Okay, this is not enough for us. We want more. Let's go also for Jerusalem." So this is an ongoing story that probably will never end. I don't see any way that it will go or end it, because as they get more, they want more. And you see that it was said that Palestinian lives matter, just try to be a gay community member, you will see that you will not get any more way to live in the Palestinian Authority or in the Gaza Strip. So we see that how the Palestinians are putting the kids, their elder women, the women, they are putting that in the front of the military. This means that they have no really any essence for human lives. Israel, during all the years, went through the Palestinians trying, let's speak, let's go to the Oslo agreements again and again with peace talks. Nothing is really happening there. There is no occupation, no occupation. The Palestinian Authority is the sole governor of the Palestinian Authority in the areas of A and B, in the Judah and Samaria. This is Palestinian country. This is not Israeli country. There is no Israeli over there, and they are showing a lot of violence. They are occupied with they equipped with a lot of weapons for themselves. So looking on the region, I don't see any, I'm very pessimistic of the future of this region.
Well, that's a very unfortunate conclusion that many are drawing. Sushant Sareen, what happens? Let's say that the ground invasion happens, that Israel is successful in carrying out its mission in wiping out Hamas. The root cause is the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. Let's remove Hamas out of the equation for once.
No, you can't remove Hamas from the equation.
Okay.
And that is why, while I can completely understand that Israel won't want to go in and clean up Gaza, but can they? And I mean that, yes, you can certainly go in and degrade the Hamas, but can you decapitate Hamas? Because a lot of the leadership is not even in Gaza. A lot of the leaders are very comfortably living in Iran or in Turkey or in Qatar or, with their fancy cars and fancy apartments. Those guys are still going to be in business. And I think their brand value among the death cult that they have built would certainly have risen. So yes, you can go into Gaza, you can degrade it, but you can't destroy the organization. And it's not the only organization which is in the business. There are others as well. And how do you handle that? So I would tend to agree that at least for the foreseeable future, I think there's no appetite for peace. I don't think there's any appetite. I don't see how any significant Israeli leader at this stage can come out and say that, okay, fine, I'm going to talk peace with the Palestinians. And then talk peace with whom? The Palestinian representative on your show was talking about Mahmoud Abbas. Is he actually a credible interlocutor anymore? Does he have anything with him anymore? What is the political capital he holds now? So there is this big problem also that there is a vacuum of leadership even in the Palestinian space, and a lot of that vacuum has been filled up by some of these terrorist organizations. And there is nobody out there with whom you can actually partner in peace. So I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a very nasty affair in the Middle East. Unfortunate, but that is what one is seeing. I hope it was not going to be that way. But then, Swati, just one more point. I think it's important to put this down. It's not as though Israelis have not made mistakes. They made plenty of mistakes, right? Including in the political negotiations, including in many other things. And there are many things to disagree with how the Israelis have gone about their business. But the Palestinians have had their share of mistakes and their share of trying to overreach what was on the table. So there is nobody who's actually blameless in this entire process. The big problem, however, is that there is a genocidal aspect to some of the terror groups on the Palestinian side. And when you hear these slogans of from the river to the sea, basically what they're talking about is a genocide of all the Jews present in that area. And in the case of terrorist organizations like Hamas, it's not just the decimation of the Jews in this particular area, it's decimation of the Jews anywhere in the world. And they make no bones about it. If you are faced with an adversary or an enemy like this, please tell me, how do you negotiate with them? I don't know. I don't have any answers.
And like Sushant Sarin saying, there is no appetite for peace in the foreseeable future. If that is the situation, then Dr. Ladwig, how do you see this playing out for the entire Middle East region? Because countries already have been drawn in this. They have chosen their sides.
Well, I first want to just pick up on something that Sushant said, which is this issue of the challenges, whether decapitation of Hamas is even possible. As long as the ideology and viewpoint resonates with such a large segment of the Palestinian population, even if Israel were able to degrade the actual organization as it exists, something else would fill to move that vacuum. As long as that viewpoint, as long as those ideologies resonate, there's going to be a significant challenge. I think, it's really interesting when we think about how this might play out more broadly in the region. I think we have to recognize that, prior to this, there was a move by a number of countries to seek a degree of normalization and recognition with Israel. Now, some of this was motivated in part by a belief that the Israel-Palestinian conflict maybe had been tamped down a bit. But the fact of the matter is, countries in the Gulf, the Saudis and others have their own geostrategic reasons for wanting to have a relationship with Israel. And I'm sorry to say that though many of these countries are wringing their hands at the moment, over their history, they have not shown a particular degree of care for the Palestinian people or the Palestinian cause. So I think at the moment, some of those normalization efforts will be on hold, particularly as the publics in a number of these countries are considerably outraged. But I don't know if this is going to be a long-term stumbling block. Again, when you think about the geostrategic contestation between Saudi and Iran, that has characterized a Cold War of sorts in the Gulf. There are other calculations at play of which this conflict will only be one, not the sole determining factor.
Okay, Sushant Sarin wants to come in, and then I'll go across to Charles.
Very quickly, just to add to what Walter said. If I was a Saudi or I was from the Emirates, I would be pointing the finger at Iran or the Hamas or any of these other organizations and blaming them for ruining my diplomacy and what I was trying to do. This is a trap which I don't know if that was the original intention, but the way it's working out, it's a trap in which these countries have fallen. Because of the Arab Street, they can't go ahead with the kind of peace process they were going ahead with, the reconciliation process, which maybe would have helped to bring about some kind of a reconciliation in Palestine as well. But that's a far shot now. But for now, I think the Iranians or whoever planned this entire operation has virtually shot that reconciliation process to the smithereens. I don't see it pick up anytime soon. Maybe 6 months, 1 year from now, if the regimes and the states in this region are brave enough to cock a snook at the Iranians and say that, okay, fine, you can keep doing what you're doing, but we are going to go ahead and we think this is the pathway to peace rather than what you are trying to do. But we'll have to wait and see.
Charles Kupchan, talking about America's role here, Palestinians are responding to what Joe Biden said, many of them disappointed, many of them also accusing the international community of being completely blind to the plight of Palestinians. How do you respond to those voices?
Well, I think the position of the United States, in addition to the position of most countries around the world, is that in the end of the day, we need to have a two-state solution. And going back to some of the comments that Hiba made, the Palestinian people ultimately deserve to have a land in which they govern themselves. The problem, however, is that Israel gave back Gaza. We had the Oslo Accords. We've had other initiatives, those that President Clinton pushed forward. And we don't have a situation in which there is a responsible Palestinian party on the other side. On the contrary, what has happened in Gaza is that Hamas takes over and they start launching missiles against Israel. And so now Israelis legitimately say, why should I give back more land and have more missiles come at me? And as a consequence, even though there are only a small percentage of the Israeli populace that is ideologically or religiously committed to ruling over the West Bank, you now have a broad cross-section of the Israeli population that says, why should we give back more land when this will only decrease our security and lead to people coming after us? So I do think that, we over the long run, we need to push the ball forward on advancing diplomacy, on moving toward a two-state solution. But right now, that seems very remote. All eyes are going to be on Gaza for the coming weeks. Maybe after the dust settles, this will be an event in which we all look into the abyss and agree that it's time to begin to push on a diplomatic resolution that will last and bring peace to both Israeli Jews and Palestinians.
Yoni wanted to come in earlier. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to respond to Ms. Husseini because I'm aware of your background. I know that you believe in peace and you've worked for peace. You are what we call the moderates. And yet here on this show, we've seen an example of the problem that we have. I stated a fact that there were democratic elections in 2006. You called it propaganda and then went into an entire diatribe of everything that Israel has doing and how we don't want peace, when the reality, the truth, and you know this very well, ma'am, we have made numerous peace offers that have all been rejected and met with violence, increasing violence, not just in numbers, but in its brutality. And here you're denying that your people hand out candies in the streets. Anybody can go on the internet and see that this is the reality. So if you are the moderate voice within your people, I'm sorry, this is a problem. I mean, do you not condemn? What are your feelings about what Hamas did to my people? Because I don't agree with the extremist settlers. If you look at my social media posts from before October 7th, you will see a lot of posts criticizing my government, criticizing those extremist settlers. I want peace with your people. I don't feel that your people want peace with me.
Okay. Okay, I want Hiba Husseini to respond to that, but also respond to what Charles said about leadership vacuum and organizations like Hamas, taking up space.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I agree that we have a leadership vacuum at the moment, and this is something that worries me greatly, especially after the day after in Gaza. I mean, what's going to happen? Who's going to govern Gaza? How are we going to govern Gaza in the coming months after the dust settles? So I agree with Charles in that respect, and we have to work very hard towards getting our national unity going in a way that we can demonstrate to our people that we have a governance, that we have the ability to self-govern and in a peaceful way. I totally agree with that. I think the emotions are high, no doubt about that. This is a very, very sad period of time for me. I mean, the disappointment I feel and I have experienced over the last 12 days has been enormous. I have dedicated my life to peace and to working on peaceful resolution of the conflict. And to see the pain and suffering, I've always said it. I am totally against violence on both sides. I do not accept the killing of a human soul, because I believe that every life matters.
Absolutely, and there is pain and suffering on both sides, but it is a fact that the world has witnessed the savagery and barbaric act, the terror that was unleashed by Hamas. It's true that lives were lost on both sides. The big question here is, will there ever be a resolution? Is there any scope for dialogue? Will there be peace? There are a lot of questions and unfortunately no right answers at this point of time. Hiba Husseini and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time.